Dr. Sarah Mitchell had seen it all during her 15 years as a military psychologist at Naval Base San Diego. Combat veterans with PTSD, soldiers struggling with deployment anxiety, officers dealing with the pressures of command. Her Tuesday afternoon appointment seemed no different from the dozens she conducted each week. Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison walked into her office at exactly 1,400 hours, his posture rigid and professional. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of quiet intensity that marked most Navy SEALs she had encountered. His service record was impressive. Multiple deployments, commendations for valor, and a spotless disciplinary history, spanning 12 years. "Please, have a seat wherever you're comfortable." Dr. Mitchell gestured toward the familiar arrangement of chairs in her office. The room was designed to feel less clinical. Warm lighting, comfortable furniture, and carefully chosen artwork that spoke of strength rather than vulnerability. Jake chose the chair facing the door, a habit she recognized in many special operations personnel. Always maintained situational awareness, even in the safest environments. His movements were controlled, economical, betraying nothing of whatever might be troubling him enough to warrant this mandatory evaluation. "I understand this is a routine psychological assessment for your upcoming promotion review," she began, settling into her own chair with his file balanced on her lap. "These evaluations help ensure our leaders are mentally prepared for increased responsibilities." "Yes, ma'am," Jake replied, his voice steady and measured. "I appreciate your time, Doctor." Mitchell had learned to read between the lines of military politeness. Jake's responses were textbook appropriate, but there was something in his eyes, a guardedness that went beyond normal professional reserve. She had developed an instinct for recognizing when someone was working too hard to appear normal. "Tell me about your current assignment," she continued, following the standard protocol. "How are you finding the transition back to stateside operations?" Jake described his role training new SEAL candidates with the kind of detailed professionalism she expected. He spoke of the challenges of preparing young men for combat, the responsibility he felt toward their development, and his pride in the Navy's elite forces. Everything he said was appropriate, even admirable. But Dr. Mitchell noticed the small things. How his hands remained perfectly still throughout their conversation, positioned precisely on the armrests of his chair. How his breathing never varied from a controlled, measured rhythm. How his eyes, while meeting hers when he spoke, seemed to focus slightly past her, rather than making genuine contact. 20 minutes into what should have been a straightforward assessment, she found herself increasingly curious about what Jake Morrison wasn't saying. His answers revealed nothing personal. No glimpse of the man behind the uniform. Even his small talk about the weather and base facilities felt rehearsed. "Jake, I hope you don't mind me asking, but how have you been sleeping lately?" The question was routine, but his reaction wasn't. For just a moment, his carefully maintained composure flickered. It was barely perceptible. A slight tightening around his eyes, a pause that lasted perhaps a second too long before he answered. "Sleep is fine, ma'am. No issues there." Dr. Mitchell made a note, not about his answer, but about that moment of hesitation. In her experience, when highly trained military personnel showed even the smallest crack in their armor, it often indicated something much larger beneath the surface. As the session continued, she found herself departing from her usual assessment routine. Instead of checking boxes on her evaluation form, she was studying Jake Morrison, the way she might examine a complex puzzle. Every response he gave was correct. But something felt choreographed about the entire interaction. "I'd like to schedule a follow-up session next week," she said, as their time drew to a close. It wasn't unusual, but it also wasn't routine for a standard promotion evaluation. Jake's expression remained neutral, but she caught another of those micro-reactions, a brief tightening of his jaw before he nodded agreement. "Of course, ma'am. Whatever you think is necessary." As he stood to leave, Dr. Mitchell noticed how he moved with particular care, as though every motion was calculated to avoid drawing attention to his body. It was subtle, the kind of thing most people would never notice. But her trained eye caught the slight favor he showed to his left side. "Jake," she called as he reached the door. "Before you go, I need to ask. Have you experienced any physical injuries recently that might be affecting your performance or well-being?" This time, his pause was longer, more obvious. When he turned back to face her, she saw something new in his expression. Not quite fear, but a wariness that hadn't been there before. "Nothing that would impact my duties, ma'am," he said carefully. Dr. Mitchell nodded, but made another note. In 15 years of conducting these assessments, she had learned that sometimes the most important information came not from what people said, but from what they worked so hard not to reveal. After Jake left, she sat in her office reviewing her notes. Everything about the session appeared normal on the surface, yet every instinct she had developed as both a psychologist and a military officer told her that Jake Morrison was carrying something far heavier than the routine stresses of military life. She found herself looking forward to their next appointment, with an anticipation that had nothing to do with professional routine and everything to do with uncovering the truth behind Lieutenant Commander Morrison's carefully constructed facade. The week between appointments gave Dr. Mitchell time to do something she rarely needed to do for routine evaluations: research. She pulled Jake Morrison's complete military medical records, diving deeper than the summary she had initially reviewed. What she found puzzled her more than it clarified anything. His medical history showed the expected collection of minor injuries common to special operations personnel. A broken finger from parachute training, stitches from a training accident, routine vaccinations and medical clearances for overseas deployments. But there were gaps, periods where medical visits were logged but details were classified or simply missing. More intriguingly, she noticed a pattern in his leave requests over the past 18 months. Jake had taken several short leaves, each lasting only 2 or 3 days, scattered throughout the year with no apparent pattern. For a man with his level of dedication and spotless record, the frequency seemed unusual. When Tuesday afternoon arrived, Jake appeared in her doorway again at precisely 1,400 hours. This time, however, Dr. Mitchell was watching more carefully. She observed how he moved through the outer office, noting the way he navigated around furniture and the subtle care he took settling into his chair. "How was your week?" she began, choosing to start with something more personal than their previous session. "Productive, ma'am. We're preparing a new class of candidates for their final evaluation phase. That must be rewarding work, shaping the next generation of SEALs." "It is." Jake's response carried genuine warmth for the first time since she had met him. "These kids, men, they've got what it takes." Watching them discover their own capabilities, pushing past limits they thought were impossible to break. It reminds you why we do what we do. Dr. Mitchell seized on this moment of authentic emotion. "It sounds like mentoring comes naturally to you. Have you always been drawn to helping others?" Something shifted in Jake's expression, a shadow passing across his features so quickly she almost missed it. "I suppose. The teams work because we look out for each other." "Tell me about your own training," she continued. "What was that experience like for you?" Jake described his path to becoming a SEAL with the same careful precision he applied to everything else. But Dr. Mitchell heard something new in his voice when he spoke about the physical challenges. There was an almost reverent quality to how he discussed pushing the human body to its absolute limits. "The ocean doesn't care about your comfort zone," he said, his eyes distant with memory. "Neither do bullets or explosives. Training teaches you that your body is just a tool. And like any tool, it can be damaged and repaired and used again." The comment struck Dr. Mitchell as oddly clinical, as though Jake was describing someone else's body rather than his own. She made a note to explore this further. "Jake, I want to ask you something, and I hope you'll be honest with me. Are you in any physical pain right now?" The question hung in the air between them. Dr. Mitchell watched as Jake's face went through a series of micro-expressions: surprise, calculation, and finally resignation. "Everyone carries some pain, ma'am. It's part of the job." "That's not what I asked." For the first time in their 2 sessions, Jake looked genuinely uncomfortable. He shifted in his chair, and Dr. Mitchell caught the slight wince he tried to suppress. "I'm managing fine," he said finally. "Managing what? Exactly?" Jake was quiet for a long moment, his hands gripping the arms of his chair with enough force that his knuckles showed white. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Some injuries heal on the outside first." Dr. Mitchell felt a chill run down her spine. In her years of working with military personnel, she had heard variations of this sentiment from soldiers, dealing with everything from battlefield injuries to military sexual trauma. The careful way Jake phrased it suggested something he couldn't or wouldn't discuss openly. "Jake, I need to ask you directly. Are you receiving medical treatment for any ongoing health issues?" "I'm cleared for full duty, ma'am. My medical records show that." "That's not what I asked either." Jake stood up abruptly, moving to the window that overlooked the base's training grounds. "Doctor," Mitchell could see tension in every line of his body as he watched young sailors conducting physical training in the distance. "You know what I see when I watch them?" he said, not turning around. "I see kids who think they understand what sacrifice means. They think it's about being willing to die for your country, for your brothers. But that's the easy part." He turned back to face her, and Dr. Mitchell saw something raw and unguarded in his expression for the first time. "The hard part is being willing to live with the consequences of that sacrifice. Being willing to carry whatever pieces of yourself you lose along the way, and still show up, still do the job, still be the person others depend on." Dr. Mitchell felt they were approaching something crucial, a truth that Jake had been carrying alone for too long. But before she could respond, his professional mask slipped back into place. "I should get back to training," he said, moving toward the door. "Jake, wait." She stood as well, her training warring with her instincts. Protocol said to let him go, to schedule another appointment, and continue the careful process of building trust. But something in his demeanor told her that if he left now, he might not come back. "I know you're protecting something," she said gently. "And I know you think you have to handle it alone. But you don't. Just, 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 just." Jake paused with his hand on the door handle, his back to her. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that seemed to age him years in the space of a few words. "Some things can't be handled, ma'am. They can only be endured." After he left, Dr. Mitchell sat in her office staring at her notes. Every instinct she had told her that Jake Morrison was in trouble. Not the kind that would show up in standard evaluations or medical records, but the kind that could destroy a person from the inside out if left untreated. She made a decision that went against standard protocol. Instead of waiting for their next scheduled appointment, she was going to find a way to see Jake's medical records in full, classifications be damned. Whatever was happening to him, whatever he was hiding, she was determined to help him face it before it was too late. Dr. Mitchell spent the next 3 days navigating the complex web of military bureaucracy, calling in favors from colleagues, and pushing the boundaries of what she could access through official channels. Her persistence finally paid off when Commander Patricia Hayes, the base's senior medical officer, agreed to meet with her privately. "Sarah, what you're asking for is highly irregular," Commander Hayes said, reviewing the request in her office. "Lieutenant Commander Morrison's classified medical files require special clearance. Pat, I've been doing this for 15 years. I know when someone is in crisis, and I know when that crisis could affect operational readiness." "Doctor," Mitchell leaned forward, her voice urgent. "I'm not asking out of curiosity. I'm asking because I think one of our best officers is suffering in silence, and it's going to destroy him if we don't intervene." Commander Hayes studied her colleague's face. They had worked together for 7 years, and she had never seen Dr. Mitchell this concerned about a routine evaluation. "What makes you think there's something in his classified files? Gaps in his medical timeline, unusual leave patterns, and behavior consistent with someone managing chronic pain or trauma. Plus, his psychological presentation suggests he's compartmentalizing something significant." After a long pause, Commander Hayes pulled out a secured tablet. "I can give you access to review the files here, in my office. But nothing leaves this room. And Sarah, if what you find indicates a security risk, we have to follow protocol." "Understood." The files that appeared on the screen told a story that made Dr. Mitchell's stomach clench. 18 months earlier, Jake Morrison had been on a classified mission overseas when his team encountered an improvised explosive device. The official report was heavily redacted, but the medical documentation was clear enough. Jake had suffered severe internal injuries, multiple broken ribs, and significant soft tissue damage to his torso and back. He had spent 6 weeks in a military hospital overseas before being medically evacuated back to the United States for additional treatment. The extent of his injuries should have resulted in a medical discharge or, at minimum, permanent light-duty status. Instead, the files showed a remarkable recovery timeline. Too remarkable, Dr. Mitchell realized as she read through the documentation. Physical therapy reports that showed progress beyond normal human healing rates. Medical clearances signed off with minimal supporting documentation, and psychological evaluations that read like textbook responses rather than genuine assessments. He fought to stay active duty, she murmured, pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. What do you mean? Commander Hayes asked. Look at this timeline. He was injured severely enough that any reasonable medical board would have recommended discharge. But somehow, he managed to convince everyone he was fully recovered. The question is, how much of that recovery was real? And how much was just an incredibly dedicated performance? The final piece of the puzzle came in a single medical note, buried deep in the file. A Navy doctor had recommended ongoing pain management and psychological counseling, noting that while Jake's physical therapy had been successful, the nature of his injuries meant he would likely experience chronic discomfort and should be monitored for signs of depression or PTSD related to his near-death experience. The recommendation had been overruled by Jake himself, who had refused additional treatment and requested immediate return to full-duty status. He's been managing severe chronic pain for over a year, Dr. Mitchell said, her voice heavy with realization. And he's been doing it alone because he was afraid that admitting he needed help would end his career. Commander Hayes was quiet for a long moment, reviewing the same information. Sarah, if this is accurate, how has he been performing his duties? His fitness reports are exemplary. That's exactly the problem. He's been performing at an exemplary level while dealing with pain and trauma that would sideline most people. He's not just hiding his condition, he's overcompensating for it. That kind of psychological pressure is unsustainable. Dr. Mitchell thought about Jake's careful movements, his controlled breathing, the way he spoke about the body as just a tool to be used and repaired. She thought about his comment that some things could only be endured, not handled. Pat, I need to see him again, but not for a routine evaluation. I think he's reached a breaking point, and I think he's smart enough to know that his next psychological review could end his career if he can't maintain his facade. What are you proposing? I want to approach this differently. Instead of trying to catch him in inconsistencies or break down his defenses, I want to offer him a way to get help without sacrificing everything he's worked for. Commander Hayes closed the tablet, her expression thoughtful. That's a dangerous precedent, Sarah. If we allow officers to hide significant medical conditions, he's not hiding it to deceive us or gain some advantage. He's hiding it because he's terrified of losing his identity, his purpose, everything that gives his life meaning. Yes, it's dangerous. But so is letting a decorated officer destroy himself trying to prove he's still worthy of serving his country. That afternoon, Dr. Mitchell sent a message to Jake, requesting an immediate meeting, not as his evaluating psychologist, but as someone who wanted to help. She didn't expect him to respond, but within an hour, her phone rang. Ma'am, this is Lieutenant Commander Morrison. I got your message. Jake, thank you for calling. I need to be direct with you. I know about your injuries from 18 months ago, and I know you've been managing significant pain while maintaining your duties. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Jake finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. Ma'am, you don't need to explain anything right now. But I need you to know that hiding this isn't protecting your career. It's destroying your health, and eventually, it's going to destroy your ability to serve effectively. Another silence. Longer this time. What happens now? Jake asked finally, and Dr. Mitchell could hear the exhaustion behind his carefully controlled tone. Now, we figure out how to get you the help you need without ending the career you've dedicated your life to. But Jake, that's only possible if you're willing to trust me enough to tell me the truth about what you've been going through. 7. Can you guarantee my career won't be over? Dr. Mitchell closed her eyes, knowing that her next words would either save Jake Morrison or lose his trust forever. I can't guarantee anything except that doing nothing isn't an option anymore. You're one of the most dedicated officers I've ever met. But dedication without self-care isn't heroism, it's slow-motion suicide. The line was quiet for so long that Dr. Mitchell wondered if Jake had hung up. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked with the weight of months of hidden suffering. I don't know how to ask for help, ma'am. I've forgotten how to be anything other than strong. Jake arrived at Dr. Mitchell's office that evening after normal duty hours, when the corridors were empty and the chances of being seen were minimal. When he entered, she immediately noticed the change in his demeanor. The rigid military bearing was still there, but underneath it was a vulnerability she had never seen before. "Thank you for agreeing to meet like this," she said, gesturing to the more comfortable seating area of her office rather than the formal chairs they had used before. Jake sat down slowly. And this time, he didn't try to hide the careful way he moved. "I've been thinking about what you said. About slow-motion suicide. And you're not wrong." Jake's voice was quiet but steady. "I've been telling myself that I was being strong. That I was doing my duty. But somewhere along the way, I stopped taking care of myself and started just surviving each day." Dr. Mitchell waited, sensing that Jake needed to find his own words for what he had been carrying alone for so long. "The explosion," he began, then stopped. "I've never talked about it. Not really. The official debriefs covered the tactical situation, the mission outcome, casualty reports, but no one ever asked about the moment when you think you're going to die." Jake's hands were clasped tightly in his lap, and Dr. Mitchell could see the tension in his shoulders as he forced himself to continue. "We were extracting a high-value target from a compound outside Kandahar. Intelligence said the area was clear, but intelligence was wrong. The IED was buried directly under our planned exit route." He paused, his breathing becoming more controlled, more deliberate. "I remember the sound first. Not the explosion itself, but the split second of absolute silence right before it. Like the whole world took a breath. Then everything went white. Then black." Dr. Mitchell remained silent, recognizing that Jake was finally allowing himself to access memories he had been compartmentalizing for months. "When I woke up in the field hospital, they told me I was lucky. Told me that if I had been standing 2 feet to the left, I would have been killed instantly. Instead, I got thrown about 15 meters and landed hard against a concrete wall." Jake shifted in his chair, and Dr. Mitchell saw him unconsciously place his hand against his left side. "The doctor said my injuries were severe but survivable. Broken ribs, internal bleeding, soft tissue damage. What they couldn't see on the x-rays was what happened to my back when I hit that wall. The pain didn't start immediately. Shock and adrenaline are powerful painkillers. But when it hit..." He trailed off, his eyes distant. "Jake, what did the pain feel like?" "Like someone was driving a knife between my shoulder blades every time I breathed. Like my lower back was being crushed in a vice whenever I tried to move. The doctor said it would fade as the swelling went down, as the tissue healed. But it didn't fade. It got worse." Dr. Mitchell made notes, not just about what Jake was saying, but about how he was saying it. The clinical detachment he used to describe his own suffering suggested a level of dissociation that concerned her. "How did you manage to convince the medical board that you were fit for duty?" Jake's smile was bitter. "I became an expert at managing pain without showing it. I learned exactly how much ibuprofen I could take without it showing up in blood tests. I practiced every movement until I could do it without grimacing. I memorized the right answers to every psychological evaluation question. That must have taken incredible discipline. It took everything I had. Every morning, I would wake up and spend an hour just preparing my mind and body to get through the day without anyone noticing I was struggling. Every night, I would collapse in my quarters and count the hours until I had to do it again." Dr. Mitchell felt a chill as she realized the extent of Jake's suffering. "Jake, what you're describing isn't strength. It's torture. You've been torturing yourself for over a year. I know." The admission came out as barely a whisper. "But I didn't know how to stop. My whole identity is built around being a Navy SEAL. Without that, who am I? What am I?" You're a human being who deserves compassion and care, starting with compassion from yourself. Jake looked up at her, and for the first time, she saw tears in his eyes. Do you know what the worst part is? It's not the physical pain. I could live with that. It's the fear. What are you afraid of? That someone will find out and decide I'm not worth the investment anymore. That they'll look at my record and decide that everything I've accomplished was just an act. That the men I'm training will lose respect for me if they know I'm broken. Dr. Mitchell leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. Jake, you are not broken. You are injured, you are struggling, but you are not broken. And the fact that you have continued to serve effectively while managing all of this doesn't make you weak. It makes you extraordinarily strong. It doesn't feel like strength. Real strength isn't about never falling down, Jake. It's about getting back up, asking for help when you need it, and having the courage to be vulnerable with people who care about you. Jake was quiet for a long time, processing what she had said. When he spoke again, his voice carried a note of desperation. What happens now? Do you have to report this? Will my security clearance be revoked? Will they discharge me? That depends on several factors, Doctor, Mitchell said carefully. The most important one being whether you're willing to accept proper treatment. Jake, you can't continue the way you've been going. Your body and mind are reaching their breaking point. What kind of treatment? Pain management from doctors who specialize in chronic conditions, physical therapy designed for your specific injuries, and psychological counseling to help you process not just the trauma of the explosion, but the trauma of carrying this burden alone for so long. Jake nodded slowly, but she could see the fear in his eyes. And my career? If you're willing to work with medical professionals and follow their recommendations, there's no reason your career has to end. Many officers serve effectively while managing chronic conditions. The key is doing it safely and sustainably, not the way you've been doing it. For the first time in their conversations, Jake allowed himself to show hope. You really think I can keep serving? Jake, you've proven you can perform at the highest level even while suffering in silence. Imagine what you could accomplish with proper support and treatment. Not just for yourself, but for all the young SEALs you're training who might face similar challenges someday. Jake wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. A gesture that reminded Dr. Mitchell that underneath the elite warrior was still the young man who had first chosen to serve his country. I don't know how to ask for help, he said again. You just did, Dr. Mitchell replied. And that's the hardest part. Everything else, we can figure out together. The following Monday marked the beginning of what Dr. Mitchell privately thought of as Jake's real recovery, though the process proved far more complex than either of them had anticipated. With Commander Hayes' support, they developed a treatment plan that would allow Jake to continue his duties while addressing his medical needs. Dr. Rebecca Chen, the base's leading pain management specialist, became Jake's primary physician. During their first appointment, she conducted a thorough examination that revealed the true extent of damage Jake had been concealing. Lieutenant Commander, I need you to understand something, Doctor, Chen said after reviewing his X-rays and MRI results. The level of chronic pain you've been managing would be debilitating for most people. The fact that you've maintained your performance standards while dealing with this is remarkable, but it's also incredibly dangerous. Jake sat on the examination table, finally allowing medical professionals to see the full extent of his condition. Dr. Mitchell observed from a chair nearby, watching as months of hidden suffering became visible under proper medical scrutiny. The good news, Dr. Chen continued, is that while your injuries are significant, they're treatable. You have severe muscle tension and nerve irritation stemming from the original trauma, compounded by 18 months of compensatory movement patterns that have created secondary issues throughout your back and shoulder. What does that mean for my career? Jake asked, the question that had driven him to hide his condition for so long. It means we're going to get you properly treated so you can serve more effectively and more safely. But Jake, this is going to require you to make some changes in how you approach your own health. The treatment plan Dr. Chen outlined was comprehensive and, initially, intimidating. Physical therapy 3 times a week, with a specialist who understood military fitness requirements. Carefully monitored pain management that would provide relief without affecting his mental clarity or physical performance. And perhaps most challenging for Jake, a commitment to honest communication about his pain levels and limitations. Dr. Mitchell worked with Jake on the psychological aspects of his recovery, helping him navigate the complex emotions that arose as he stopped suppressing his pain and started addressing it directly. "I feel like I'm betraying something," Jake admitted during one of their sessions. "Like I'm giving up part of what made me effective." "What made you effective wasn't your ability to ignore pain, doctor," Mitchell replied. "It was your dedication, your intelligence, your ability to lead and train others. Those qualities don't disappear because you're taking care of yourself." The most difficult part of Jake's recovery was learning to trust his body again. Months of forcing himself through pain had created a psychological disconnect that took time to bridge. Dr. Chen worked with him to understand the difference between the sharp, warning pain that indicated potential injury and the chronic discomfort that was part of his condition. "Pain serves a purpose," she explained during one of their sessions. "It's information. But chronic pain is like a car alarm that won't turn off. It stops being useful information and becomes noise. Our goal is to turn down that noise so you can hear the signals that actually matter." Jake's colleagues began to notice changes in him, though not in the way he had feared. Chief Petty Officer Maria Santos, who had worked with Jake in the training program for 3 years, was the first to comment. "Sir, I don't know what's different about your approach lately, but the candidates are responding better than I've ever seen," she told him after observing a particularly effective training session. Jake had been worried that addressing his pain would make him appear weak or vulnerable to the men he was training. Instead, he found that as he became more honest about his own limitations and the importance of self-care, he was able to teach more effectively about sustainable performance and injury prevention. "I used to tell them that pain was weakness leaving the body," Jake confided to Dr. Mitchell. "Now I tell them that pain is their body's way of keeping them mission-ready for the long haul." The transformation wasn't linear or easy. There were days when Jake's pain levels spiked despite treatment, and moments when he questioned whether he was becoming soft by accepting help. Dr. Mitchell worked with him through these setbacks, helping him develop coping strategies that didn't involve hiding or minimizing his struggles. 6 weeks into his treatment program, Jake experienced what Dr. Chen called a breakthrough moment. For the first time in over a year, he woke up without immediately assessing his pain level and calculating how much energy it would take to appear normal. "I didn't realize how much mental energy I was using just to get through each day," he told Dr. Mitchell. "It's like I was running all my programs on half power without knowing it." The change was noticeable in his work performance as well. Training reports showed that Jake was more patient with struggling candidates, more innovative in his teaching methods, and more effective at identifying and addressing potential injury risks among the trainees. Commander Hayes, who had been monitoring Jake's progress closely, called Dr. Mitchell to discuss what she was observing. "Sarah, I want you to know that Jake's willingness to address his condition hasn't hurt his standing. It's enhanced it. His supervisor reports that he's performing better than he has in months, and his leadership effectiveness has actually improved." Dr. Mitchell wasn't surprised. In her experience, military personnel who learned to manage their health challenges effectively often became better leaders, more empathetic mentors, and more valuable assets to their units. Jake's transformation became complete during a training exercise when one of his candidates suffered a minor back injury. Instead of pushing through or hiding the problem, the young sailor immediately reported the issue, explaining that Lieutenant Commander Morrison had taught him the importance of addressing injuries early. "You know what the kid said to me?" Jake told Dr. Mitchell the next day, his voice filled with pride. He said, "Sir, you taught us that taking care of ourselves isn't selfish. It's part of taking care of our team." That's when I knew I was teaching them something more valuable than I ever did when I was pretending to be invincible. As Jake's treatment progressed, he began to see his experience not as a failure of strength, but as a source of wisdom that made him a better soldier, leader, and teacher. The young man who had walked into Dr. Mitchell's office trying desperately to hide his struggles had become someone who could help others navigate their own challenges with courage and intelligence. "I spent so much energy trying to be the person I thought the Navy needed," Jake reflected. "It turned out the Navy needed someone who knew how to be human while being a warrior, someone who could show others that strength and vulnerability aren't opposites, They're partners. 6 months after that first routine appointment, Dr. Mitchell sat in the same office where Jake Morrison had initially tried so hard to appear perfect. Today, however, the man across from her bore little resemblance to the rigidly controlled officer she had first met. Jake moved with the same precision and competence, but there was an ease to his movements that had been absent before. His breathing was natural, his posture relaxed but alert, and most notably, his eyes engaged directly with hers when he spoke. "I wanted to update you on how the new wellness protocols are being received," Jake said, settling into his chair without the careful calculation she had observed in their early sessions. Over the past 3 months, Jake had been working with Dr. Mitchell and the base command to develop comprehensive wellness protocols for special operations personnel. His experience had highlighted gaps in how the military identified and addressed chronic conditions among its most elite units. "The initial resistance was about what we expected," Jake continued. "Some of the senior NCOs worried that focusing on injury prevention and mental health would make their teams soft. But the results speak for themselves." The pilot program Jake had helped design included regular psychological check-ins that went beyond standard evaluations, physical assessments that looked for early signs of overuse injuries, and most importantly, training that normalized seeking help before problems became critical. "Tell me about the feedback from the candidates," Dr. Mitchell prompted. "That's where the real success is showing." Jake's face lit up with genuine enthusiasm. "We had a candidate last week who came forward about having trouble sleeping after a particularly intense training scenario. Instead of trying to push through it or hide it, he used the protocols we established to get help immediately." Dr. Mitchell smiled, remembering how different Jake's approach to similar challenges had been just months earlier. The kid was back to full training capacity within days, and more importantly, he's become an advocate for the program among his peers. They're starting to see wellness maintenance as part of being an elite warrior, not a sign of weakness. Jake had become the program's most effective spokesperson, not because he preached about the importance of seeking help, but because he embodied the reality that addressing health challenges made someone stronger, not weaker. "I've been thinking about something you said early in our sessions," Jake continued. "About how real strength isn't about never falling down, but about getting back up and asking for help when you need it." "I remember. I think there's more to it than that. Real strength is also about helping others get back up. And you can't do that effectively if you're pretending you've never been down yourself." Dr. Mitchell reflected on the transformation she had witnessed. The Jake Morrison sitting before her had not only recovered from his physical and psychological trauma, but had used that experience to become a more effective leader and mentor. "I've got some news I wanted to share with you," Jake said, his expression becoming more serious. "I've been offered a position developing wellness protocols for special operations units, Navy-wide." Dr. Mitchell felt a mix of pride and loss. Jake had become not just a successful case study, but a colleague whose insights had influenced her own approach to military psychology. "That's an incredible opportunity, Jake. How do you feel about it?" "Excited. Nervous. But mostly, I feel like I'm finally using everything I've learned. Not just from my SEAL training, but from everything that happened after I got injured. From learning how to ask for help, how to accept that I'm human, how to be vulnerable without losing my effectiveness." 2. Jake paused, looking out the window at the training grounds where he had spent so many months watching candidates and remembering his own struggles. "You know what I realized? My injury didn't end my career as a Navy SEAL. It evolved it. I thought being a warrior meant being invulnerable, but it actually means being strong enough to face your vulnerabilities and still show up for your mission." Dr. Mitchell nodded, thinking about all the military personnel she had worked with over the years, who might have benefited from Jake's current perspective much earlier in their struggles. "What do you think would have happened if you had told the truth about your condition from the beginning?" she asked. Jake considered the question carefully. "I think I was too afraid and too proud to find out, but looking back, I think I would have gotten help sooner, suffered less, and probably been more effective throughout my recovery. Fear made me think I was protecting my career, but I was actually endangering it. And now? Now I know that the Navy didn't need me to be perfect. They needed me to be honest, effective, and committed to getting better. Those are very different things." As their session concluded, Jake stood with the fluid confidence of someone comfortable in his own body. Dr. Mitchell watched him move, remembering the careful, controlled motions of their first meeting. Jake, before you take on this new role, I want you to remember something. You're going to encounter personnel who are in exactly the same place you were 18 months ago. They're going to be afraid, proud, and convinced that admitting they need help will end their careers. Any advice for reaching them? Tell them your story. Not as a lesson or a lecture, but as proof that it's possible to be both strong and human. That seeking help isn't giving up. It's gearing up for a longer, more effective service to something greater than yourself. Jake smiled, the expression reaching his eyes in a way that had been absent during their early sessions. You know, Dr. Mitchell, when I first walked into this office, I thought I was here for a routine evaluation that I just needed to get through. I never imagined it would change not just my career, but my entire understanding of what it means to serve. What did you think service meant then? Sacrifice without complaint, strength without vulnerability, leadership without humanity. Now I know that true service means bringing your whole self, including your struggles and your healing, to something bigger than yourself. As Jake left her office for the last time as a patient, Dr. Mitchell made notes not about his psychological state or fitness for duty, but about the profound transformation she had witnessed. A routine appointment had become an opportunity to save not just one officer's career, but potentially the careers and lives of countless others who would benefit from Jake's new understanding of strength, service, and recovery. The scars Jake carried from that explosion in Afghanistan would always be part of his story, but instead of being marks of something that had broken him, they had become evidence of something that had ultimately made him stronger. Not despite his vulnerability, but because of his courage in facing it. 6 months later, when Dr. Mitchell received updates about the Navy-wide implementation of Jake's wellness protocols, she smiled at the reports of decreased injury rates, improved retention among special operations personnel, and most importantly, increased willingness among elite military units to seek help when needed. Jake Morrison had learned that the most important mission of his career wasn't the one that had nearly killed him in Afghanistan. It was the one that had started in a psychologist's office with a simple question: why are you here? The answer had transformed not just his life, but his understanding of what it truly meant to serve with honor, courage, and humanity.